East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Samsung workers approve a landmark wage deal, securing massive AI-linked bonuses and averting a threatened strike in the semiconductor division. Now, the big question, will other unions follow? AI-fueled demand sends the market valuation for SK Hynix soaring as it joins Samsung and Micron in the trillion-dollar club. And it looks like Nvidia is going big in Taiwan. A new headquarters by 2030, 4,000 jobs and a $150 billion yearly investment, as CEO Jensen Huang calls the island the epicenter of AI. Plus, Japan's biggest intelligence overhaul since the Second World War includes a new central council to strengthen information gathering and analysis, chaired by Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. Also tonight, a rivalry between the US and China to establish a permanent foothold on the moon as NASA unveils a blueprint for a lasting lunar outpost that could see humans back on the moon as early as 2028. Unionized workers at Samsung Electronics have approved a landmark wage deal that will give employees in the booming memory chip division substantial bonuses linked to artificial intelligence. It will also avert a major strike that threatened to rattle global chip supplies. Now, the government-mediated agreement comes after a bitter 5-month dispute over profit sharing at the memory chip maker. Under the deal, 78,000 semiconductor workers will receive a regular cash bonus equal to 50% of their annual salary. Now, some of those workers are set to receive bonuses of around $416,000 this year. Samsung will also set aside 10.5% of its chip division operating profit for special stock bonuses. Now, employees in Samsung's other chip units will receive smaller but still substantial bonuses, while staff in its consumer electronics divisions are set to receive far less. While the deal has brought relief across South Korea, it has also highlighted widening disparities among workers at the tech giant. Now, the deal also raising concerns among South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, business groups and academics. They worry other unions could now take a tougher stance and push for similar demands. A shareholder group representing individual investors has also threatened legal action, arguing that the deal was not approved at a shareholders' meeting. Critics say the agreement reduces funds available to shareholders and could face legal challenges over directors' duties to investors. Now, Japan has passed a law to launch a Central Intelligence Council, the move described by some observers as the country's most significant intelligence overhaul since World War II. The legislation will upgrade an existing intelligence body into a central command for collecting and analyzing data linked to security and public safety. The newly created National Intelligence Council will be chaired by the Prime Minister. Japanese leader Sanae Takaichi says that the move is needed to bring together intel work that is now split across agencies. And these include the police, foreign ministry, and defense ministry. Japanese officials have long argued that stronger intelligence capabilities are needed to deter spying, prevent terrorism, and protect sensitive technologies. But the issue has taken on added urgency amid a diplomatic row with Beijing, following Ms. Takaichi's suggestion in November that Tokyo could intervene militarily should there be an outbreak of war between China and Taiwan. Right, for the latest now, we are joined by CNA senior correspondent Michio Ishida live from Tokyo. Michio, let's talk about this new National Intelligence Agency. Why does Tokyo want it now, and what will it do with it?
Well, Oteli, organizations that basically collect intelligence in Japan are the Cabinet Intelligence and Research Office, the National Police Agency, Public Security Intelligence Agency, Foreign Ministry, and Defense Ministry. But they do not necessarily share their information. Now, a National Intelligence Agency is aimed to integrate intelligence gathering and decision-making. And for that, a bill to create a National Intelligence Council was legislated. The council will include cabinet ministers with Prime Minister as the chair. Now, for years, lawmakers, academics have complained that Japan's intelligence gathering was weak. For example, the kidnapping of Japanese by North Korean spies, which happened mostly in the 1970s and 80s, it was only in 2004 North Korea admitted to the abduction, and Japan was able to repatriate 5, but still more are unaccounted for. Now, Prime Minister Takaichi explained during the Upper House committee session the main purpose of creating a new agency is on the back of a complex and severe international environment for peace and prosperity in Japan. Now, international competition and diplomatic activities, defense, and in the economy is intense, and there are countries involved in illegal activities trying to steal advanced technology, launch cyber attacks towards public and private sectors to access vital information. And there are those spreading fake news, which Japan is facing. That's according to Ms. Takaichi. And there's an immediate need to take countermeasures and try to trace the source and inform the public. Ms. Takaichi said Japan will work together with its ally and like-minded nations to promote a safe and secure nation for the people of Japan.
But of course, such major reforms have also drawn some concerns. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, opposition party members, in particular constitutional Democrats, questioned Ms. Takaichi on the protection of personal information. And Hyogo Prefecture's Bar Association also drew attention on this point. It issued a statement that stepping up intelligence could violate human rights, and it suggested that the government review human rights violation from the past intelligence gathering and decisions made by the court, and to set up a third party to monitor privacy protection. And without these, the Bar Association expressed opposition to the bill. Now, Ms. Takaichi told the Upper House Committee she will take into consideration privacy after the passage of the bill. Now, as to how the public feels about the setup, Nikkei and TV Tokyo did a joint public opinion survey in April. And according to the poll, 41% suggested intelligence capability can be stepped up through such agency. 46% believe it cannot. Now, Ms. Takaichi regards it just the first step, in any case, towards intelligence reform. And there is also the question of what about the use of arms for intense intelligence gathering, as Japan cannot use force under its pacifist constitution. Now, there were protesters in front of Parliament against the bill, afraid protesters could be subject to investigation. Next, Ms. Takaichi is believed to want to pass an anti-espionage law, which is her aspiration before taking office.
Well, thanks for that update on Japan security. CNA senior correspondent Michio Ishida speaking with us from Tokyo. Germany's economy minister wants to boost cooperation with China, but stresses the need for fair competition. Well, China has long been a reliable market for German goods, from cars to factory machinery, but it has in recent years turned into a fierce competitor in many other industries.
Unsere Unternehmen scheuen keinen Wettbewerb. Unsere Unternehmen sind gewohnt, sich in harten wettbewerblichen Bedingungen nicht nur zurechtzufinden, sondern auch durchzusetzen. Wir suchen den Dialog mit China, weil es faire Wettbewerbsbedingungen braucht. Wettbewerb ist gut und sorgt dafür, dass man gemeinsam besser wird. Aber Wettbewerb muss so gestaltet und organisiert sein, dass er zu beiderseitigem Nutzen ist.
China remained Germany's biggest trading partner last year, but German exports to China have fallen 10%, while imports continued to rise, widening Germany's trade deficit. Rare earth supply is also high on the agenda as Germany seeks reliable access to critical minerals used in key industries. Now, the minister is in Beijing with a delegation that includes top German executives. China's top diplomat Wang Yi says that Beijing is ready to deepen practical cooperation with Panama as he urges the Central American country to safeguard rights of Chinese firms. A Chinese state-run Xinhua News says that Mr. Wang also stressed that bilateral ties should not be subjected to third-party interference as he met with his Panamanian counterpart on the sidelines of a UN Security Council session in New York. The meeting comes after months of tension over two key container terminals at both ends of the Panama Canal. Earlier this year, a subsidiary of Hong Kong-listed CK Hutchison was stripped of its rights to run the terminals by Panama's Supreme Court after pressure from the U.S. to curb what Washington perceives as Chinese influence over the waterway, which handles about 5% of global maritime trade. China and Hong Kong authorities oppose the court ruling, calling it, quote, an act of bad faith. CK Hutchison accused Panama of unlawfully seizing property and has launched an international arbitration case seeking damages of more than $2 billion US. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is on the second day of his 4-day state visit to Japan. Well, earlier today, he received a ceremonial welcome at Tokyo's Imperial Palace. Emperor Naruhito and Empress Masako greeted Mr. Marcos and conferred on him and his wife the country's highest orders. The president reciprocated the gesture, giving their imperial majesties the Philippines' highest civilian honors. In a 20-minute chat with the emperor, Mr. Marcos highlighted that bilateral ties had progressed remarkably across many fields. The emperor responded by expressing Filipinos' significant contribution to Japanese society. This evening, the imperial household is hosting a state banquet for the presidential couple. And Mr. Marcos is the first Philippine president to visit Japan in more than a decade. Tomorrow, he will address the Japanese Diet and hold a summit with Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. Both sides are seeking to upgrade ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Tokyo and Manila are also expected to sign a series of agreements covering trade, investment, maritime security, and defense cooperation. Time now for a short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, profits of China's major industrial firms hitting their fastest growth in 2 years, despite broader signs of slowing economic momentum. Plus, Samsung plans $1.5 billion chip testing plant in Vietnam in a bid to fill a global memory shortage. Hello again, you're watching East Asia Tonight, and it is time now to get you up to date with your business news with none other than Olivia Marzuki. Now, Liv, I believe that demand for Nvidia's key memory chips is apparently turning a South Korean tech giant into one of AI's biggest market winners. Is that right?
That's right, I'll tell you. We're talking about SK Hynix. It is joining the $1 trillion club, powered by the AI boom. Shares of Nvidia's top supplier of high bandwidth memory chips soaring by more than 9% today, extending a rally that has seen its stock price surge more than 900% over the past year. Strong AI data center demand have caused prices of memory chips to surge, helping chip makers to post record profits. SK Hynix is now the second South Korean company in the $1 trillion club, as the broader AI boom pushes tech firms to dizzying valuations, topped by Nvidia, Alphabet, and Apple. That boom boosting the benchmark Kospi up to another record high in intraday trading. It rose by more than 5% before paring back some gains to close 2.25% higher. Year to date, the index has nearly doubled in value, outpacing that of the dot-com era. The Kospi's gains largely driven by heavyweights, the usual suspects, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, which account for more than half of the index. Top gainers today include Samsung Climate Control, up almost 30%, Samsung SDS higher by about the same margin, and the IT and mobility software subsidiary of Hyundai Motor Group also firmer. American chipmaker Micron also joined the $1 trillion club overnight on an AI-driven rally. Chris Weston, head of research at Pepperstone, explains how memory shortage is driving up share prices.
Memory is a major part of the AI process, training, inference. You know, there's a huge amount of memory that's consumed in the compute process, and you know, there's not a lot of it out there. So there's only a handful of major players in this world. You know, Micron, Samsung, they're the big players. So of course, when you've got a major supply constraint, huge underinvestment coming through, and a handful of players, they do have incredible pricing power. And of course, that's what we've been seeing. So whether we're on the HBM, the high bandwidth memory side, or in the DRAM, you know, you are looking at a situation where they've just got everything working, and the share prices have obviously reflected that. I think, well, if you look at Micron, what's up 800% over the last 12 months or so. So, they've had some incredible moves, and that's a reflection of those supply deficits that have come through. Of course, what we're seeing on the day, though, is not just, if you take Micron, for example, it hasn't just been about what UBS has said, that this could double over the next 12 months. We've seen further comments from the CEO about the supply deficit situation, the huge demand that's coming through the process to get compute. But also, there's just so much of this is driven by flow effects. Yeah, you've seen huge call buying from the options market, from traders. Obviously, dealers who've sold the calls have to go out and hedge their exposures, and that means buying the underlying. And as prices are going up, it just perpetuates prices. So momentum is the ultimate beast in these stocks.
Nvidia has officially broken ground on its new Taiwan headquarters. It is one of the biggest overseas investments for the $5 trillion company. Known as the Constellation, it is modeled after its headquarters in California and is expected to be operational by 2030. CEO Jensen Huang spoke at the ceremony, calling Taiwan, quote, the epicenter of the AI revolution.
Taiwan is booming. And it makes sense Taiwan is booming. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Nvidia was spending about $15 billion a year in Taiwan. Now, we're spending 100, going to $150 billion in Taiwan each year.
The new headquarters will deepen Nvidia's collaboration with Taiwan's tech industry, and it comes as Taiwan continues to ride the global AI wave. Taiwan's industrial production for April surged 14% from a year ago, marking the 26th consecutive month of year-on-year growth. Taiwan's Ministry of Economic Affairs attributed it to the island's electronics sector continuing to benefit from the robust demand for AI, noting that high-performance computing devices and cloud data services boosted overall industrial production. Samsung Electronics plans to invest $1.5 billion to build its first semiconductor testing plant in Vietnam. And this move comes as it looks to ease a global chip supply crunch driven by surging AI demand. The new factory is being built in the north of Hanoi, where Samsung produces smartphones and tablets. It is slated to start operations in November next year. The plant would focus on legacy chips, which are in severe shortage, as major producers dedicate more production capacity to manufacturing AI chips. Samsung is the largest foreign investor in Vietnam, having committed more than $23 billion to multiple projects over a few decades. Vietnam approved the chip plant investment in March, and Samsung plans to reinvest up to $2.5 billion from the profits for a potential second factory. And Japan's Nikkei retreated from a record peak to end the day nearly flat as investors turned cautious over the heated rally in AI-related stocks. Chip equipment makers Tokyo Electron and Advantest jumped on optimism over sustained demand for AI processors, but risks still remain on the broader Japanese economy. Bank of Japan Governor Kazuo Ueda warns that the energy price shock may persist if it begins impacting wages and inflation expectations. The markets expect the BOJ to hike rates as soon as next month, as surging oil prices add to price pressures. China and Hong Kong stocks retreating in volatile trade today, despite industrial profits logging their fastest gain in more than 2 years. The Shanghai Comp down by more than 1.2%. Shenzhen also in the red, about 0.8%, and Hang Seng down more than 1% at the closing bell. Profits at China's industrial firms rose nearly 25% on year in April, picking up pace from a 15% jump in March. And this comes even amid persistent domestic headwinds and heightened global uncertainty. Exports gained momentum last month, rising 14.1% in April from a year earlier. The increase was driven by strong global investment in AI, while buyers also rushed purchases amid concerns that the war in Iran could push costs even higher. Profits in computing and electronics manufacturing, the largest sector by profit, more than doubled from a year ago. Mining-related industries also posted a 5-fold jump in profits, lifting overall industrial earnings. But strong exports have not been enough to offset weak domestic demand, especially in the auto sector. Profits for car makers fell nearly 17% in the first 4 months of the year. The latest data points to an uneven recovery, with firms relying increasingly on overseas demand to drive growth. Hong Kong International Airport's second passenger terminal reopened today, 6 years after closing, as part of a redevelopment project to build a third runway. The rebuilt terminal is expected to increase the airport's overall capacity to 100 million passengers a year, as Hong Kong looks to reinforce its status as an aviation hub. The terminal is going big on self-service and smart technologies, with self-check-in kiosks and bag drop facilities that use facial recognition and artificial intelligence. After checking in and going through immigration at Terminal 2, passengers will have to travel back to Terminal 1 to board their flights. The reopened terminal will eventually house 15 mostly budget carriers operating regional routes, and it is expected to handle 8 million passenger trips in its first year of operation. Its dedicated departure concourse and boarding gates are scheduled to open at the end of next year.
非常方便啦，流程好快啦，同埋好多嗰啲員工會協助我哋咯。
Check tickets and to the drop off, I think just 1 or 2 minutes to finish all the process.
We went to the self-check-in, but it didn't work, so we had to go back here. And I think I prefer to talk to human, for the check-in. So I prefer it, and it was very fluid, and everything was okay.
Coming up next on Business on East Asia tonight, Indonesia is looking to boost revenue with a new export regime that tightens state control of key commodities. But the move could rattle the biggest buyers of the nation's goods, including China and Japan. We'll be getting more insights with an expert after the break.
This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Samsung Electronics workers approve a landmark profit-sharing pay deal, averting a strike at the world's largest memory chip maker. South Korea's SK Hynix rides the AI boom as its market cap crosses $1 trillion, joining memory chip rivals Samsung and Micron in reaching that milestone. Plus, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang putting money where his mouth is, with plans to invest up to $150 billion a year in Taiwan, after calling it the epicenter of the AI revolution. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto is seeking to plug what he claims is a leakage in state revenues by tightening controls on key exports. But the move could ripple across East Asia, where China, Japan, and South Korea rely on Indonesia's commodities. Now, analysts warn that it may add risk to an economy already being watched by skeptical foreign investors. CNA's Olivia Marzuki explains.
Indonesia's economic strength has long come from what it ships out, raw and processed commodities. But the nation's biggest source of wealth has recently become the nation's biggest uncertainty under President Prabowo's so-called one-gate centralized export system. This aims to address practices such as under-invoicing, transfer pricing, and export earnings kept offshore.
This is the main objective, is about control. Indonesia has decided the state should control how its biggest exports leave the country, not corporations anymore. So coal, palm oil, and eventually nickel would all go through a single state sanctioned entity. Now that's the major break from how business has worked for decades, right? So this is one of the biggest move towards economic nationalism that we have seen for years.
Under the arrangement, a unit of Sovereign Wealth Fund Danantara, PT Danantara Sumber Daya Indonesia, will manage the sales of key commodities, coal, palm oil, ferroalloys, which made up around 23% of total exports last year. It is designed to improve traceability and raise government revenue, basically stemming tax avoidance. Operationally, it is an enormous undertaking.
Now the question boils down to implementation ultimately, right? Because this announcement has arrived. It is a huge change from the previous way things were done for Indonesia, particularly for commodity exports. Ultimately, everything right now will boil down to implementation. How Dhanantara and the new entity under Dhanantara will be staffed to implement such a huge undertaking.
Already, confusion reigns in the palm oil industry over which products are covered and which may be exempt. Some buyers are demanding discounts, others are hedging against possible supply disruption. Improved transparency, perhaps, but investors see a different side of the coin. This at a time of rising interest rates, a weakening local currency, and concern about the national balance sheet.
Indonesia, like we say, is a twin deficit economy. We do have deficits on the fiscal side as well as the current account side. We also got the balance of payments deficit for Q1, which was large as well, over $9 billion, which suggests that the external side of this economy is being looked at very closely by investors as well.
Those uncertainties feeding into an economic loop that ultimately puts investor confidence at risk as buyers potentially delay deals and demand lower prices.
The buyers, the miners definitely do not like this policy. But will there be a big response? I don't think so. I think there will be a quiet response. But that's actually the most damaging response possible.
The largest commodity investors in Indonesia, China, Singapore, the US, have much at stake as the government adds another layer of uncertainty to business.
None of those incidents or facts on their own would be a crisis, but together they are a pattern. And patterns are what investors and traders act on.
The onus is really on the authorities to communicate. It is on the authorities to prove or to provide comfort to the private sector, particularly that pre-existing contracts will not be negated, and to essentially continue keeping Indonesia as the strong commodity exporter that it is.
Semua sumber daya alam Indonesia adalah milik rakyat Indonesia, milik bangsa Indonesia. Karena itu negara berhak mengetahui secara rinci sumber daya alam kita yang dijual keluar Indonesia.
Politically, the president's message is powerful. Indonesia should capture more value from its own resources. But confidence is also a commodity. And right now, that is what Indonesia has to protect. For more on this, we are joined by Dr. Maria Monica Wiharja. She's a fellow and a co-coordinator of the Media, Technology and Society program at IC's Yusuf Ishak Institute. Monica, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, we'd like to get your thoughts on the significance of Indonesia's one-gate export controls policy. How big of a shift is this under President Prabowo? What are the pros and cons of this move?
Okay, first of all, I just would like to mention that as the previous analyst has already alluded to, that the details of how this new trading company will work will be very important. And as if right now there is not yet the regulations of how this is going to be implemented is not yet released or issued. So the details will still need to be watched over in the next few days. In terms of how this could shift Indonesia's trade, and how international buyers might diversify away from Indonesia because of this new trading company. I think given the current perception and given the current trust in Indonesia's policy-making decisions, policies, and also state capacity, as we've seen in the recent plummeting of the Indonesia Stock Exchange, and recent downgrades by the rating agencies, there is certainly a potential risk that this new trading company could make international buyers diversify away from Indonesia and will look for other countries to fill in their export demands.
So, Monica, just developing that point a bit more. So, if the state does become the gatekeeper for key exports, what then changes first for industries that rely on whether it's Indonesian coal, palm oil, or minerals, and how much of that could eventually flow through to the consumers?
Okay, so from the latest speeches by Danantara officials and by other public officials, it seems that the new trading company will become a profit-making trading company, which means that they will maximize profit. So it's not only a government agency where export of natural resources will be passed through, but they will try to maximize profits. And this could mean that they will buy low from domestic producers and will sell high to international buyers. That could squeeze the margins of domestic producers, and that could be like a worrying sign for domestic producers. And because of this, I think the greater concern is that it may disincentivize domestic producers to produce and to export because of the lower prices that they could sell to the international market. And in terms of the pass-through to consumers, certainly when this new trading company sell high to international buyers, then it could affect also the international consumers because of the higher prices that the Indonesian government will sell their natural resources to.
Monica, China and several other countries have poured in so much capital into Indonesia's resource sector. What do you think this message actually send to firms already operating in Indonesia?
So as of right now, the regulation stipulates that they will control export of only 3 strategic commodities, namely palm oil, coal, and ferroalloy, the 3 commodities that you already mentioned. But I think it is possible that it will be expanded to other strategic commodities, including critical raw minerals such as nickel, in which the Chinese businesses and investors have invested a lot in recent years in its downstreaming industry. So if it's expanded to other critical raw minerals in which the Chinese businesses and investors have invested a lot in, then it will certainly hurt these Chinese businesses and investors, because now they cannot export directly their products where they have invested in directly to China, but have to go through this trading company.
So if, let's say, these major buyers, they move to reduce dependence on Indonesia, I mean, is diversification actually a realistic option, or is Indonesia actually much harder to replace?
It will depend on the commodities. So for example, for palm oil, Malaysia is just next to Indonesia when it comes to being a global producer and also exporter of palm oil. So international buyers like China or India can easily diversify away from Indonesia and buy more of palm oil from Malaysia. For coal, China and India are still the largest producers in the world, with China being the largest producers by far. So international buyers, including China and India, which are Indonesia's biggest export destinations for its coal, can diversify away from Indonesia by reducing its imports from Indonesia when it comes to coal, and import more from other countries, including the U.S., Australia, and other countries that have a great supply of coal.
Monica, one last question before you go. Could this push big manufacturers such as Japan and South Korea to rethink supply chains that depend on Indonesian resources?
So, again, it depends on the commodities and how hard it is to diversify away from Indonesia. In the case of, let's say, like nickel, in which Indonesia holds 60% of the global reserve, it might be not so easy. But in commodities such as coal or palm oil, it might be easier to diversify away from Indonesia. But it seems that the establishment of this new trading company is not only a technical matter, meaning like addressing the under-invoicing, transfer pricing, but also a domestic thing, increasing state coffer and foreign exchange revenues to help boost the rupiah. But also it's a strategic thing, meaning like I think the Indonesian government also wants to leverage its own natural resources for strategic things, so that it has more bargaining chips on the table when it comes to hard negotiations with other countries.
Well, thanks so much for helping us unpack Indonesia's export controls. Many thanks for your time and thoughts, Dr. Maria Monica Wihaja, Fellow and Co-Coordinator of the Media, Technology and Society Program at ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute. And of course, big thanks to CNA's Olivia Marzuki as well. South Korea says it will summon Iran's ambassador after investigations revealed that missiles developed and used by Tehran were likely involved in an attack on one of its cargo ships anchored in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the comments came as Seoul's foreign ministry announced the findings of a weeks-long government probe into the incident. It said the missiles are of a type operated by Iranian ground and naval forces, as well as pro-Iran groups. Seoul says that it will lodge a strong protest and demand measures to prevent a repeat of the incident. The HMM Namu was said to have been hit by 2 airborne objects earlier this month, while stranded in the vital waterway amid the Middle East conflict. The strike caused an explosion and fire on board, leaving one of the 24 crew members with minor injuries. U.S. President Donald Trump blamed Tehran for the strike, but Iran's embassy in Seoul denied any involvement by its country's military. A Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has urged all sides in the war on Iran to stay committed to pursuing peace, respect the ongoing truce, and meet each other halfway in talks to reach a deal, while urging support for the multilateral body. Well, he made those remarks as he hosted a meeting of the UN Security Council in New York. Mitch McCann has more for CNA from the UN in New York.
The theme of Tuesday's meeting, upholding the UN Charter and strengthening the UN-centred international system, underscores China's long-held desire that members use the UN Security Council as a tool to solve disputes rather than acting unilaterally and violating international law. Secretary-General Antonio Guterres opened the meeting where he discussed the ever-increasing number of conflicts the Security Council is being forced to face, illustrating the volatile and urgent geopolitical situation.
We now face the highest number of conflicts since the founding of the United Nations. And there is growing external interference, including the provision of weapons such as drones, which now frequently target civilians and civilian objects. Violence is expanding in scale and complexity in the Middle East, Sudan, Ukraine and beyond.
When China's foreign minister addressed the council, Wang Yi underscored China's desire for members to use the UN as a primary place for diplomacy, but he chose not to mention specific countries failing to do so, despite China having criticised the US in January for what it labelled bullying over its military action in Venezuela and saying actions against Iran violated the UN Charter.
自觉维护安理会的权威，任何绕开安理会授权的 单边军事行动都不可接受。任何超出安理会决议范畴的单边制裁都不具合法性。
Meanwhile, the United States sought to defend its policy direction under President Trump, with Washington often accused of acting on its own and flagrantly ignoring long-held institutions. Its representative rejected that idea, saying that the US had streamlined bureaucracy, eliminated duplication and ensured accountability for a more effective UN.
What we are working towards is not a rejection of multilateralism, but putting clarity and results over inefficiency and hollow words. We will continue to work to advance the founding principles of the UN Charter. We call on those whose actions undermine the UN Charter, including at times permanent members of this Council, to change course immediately.
Earlier in the day, Ukraine's representative, alongside other UN ambassadors, condemned recent Russian attacks on Ukraine, and it followed Moscow's call for foreigners to leave Kiev, which raised the possibility of a major escalation in its attacks. At the UN Security Council, Russia didn't respond to those comments, but it revealed that its deputy foreign minister was rejected when seeking a visa to attend the meeting in New York.
Несмотря на все наши попытки добиться от американской стороны выдачи ему визы, она так и не была ему выдана. Рассматриваем это не только как нарушение Вашингтоном своих обязательств по соглашению о центральных учреждениях ООН, согласно которым доступ в штаб-квартиру Всемирной организации должен быть обеспечен всем, без исключения официальным лицам стран-членов, но и как вопиющее неуважение к председательству Китая в Совете Безопасности.
Tuesday's meeting comes at a critical moment for the global body, which is under pressure to deliver solutions to an overwhelming number of crises. But it remains to be seen whether China's demands for member states to use the UN to solve them will make any meaningful difference or fall on deaf ears. For CNA, I'm Mitch McCann at the United Nations in New York.
We have more coverage of the war in Iran on our website, cna.asia, as well as our mobile app. So do log on for articles such as this one on a commentator seeing Tehran beating Donald Trump in the art of the deal. Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, NASA unveils plans for a permanent lunar base in what's shaping up to be a race to the moon between the US and China. Plus, Chinese authorities crack down on illegal production of fireworks weeks after one of the nation's deadliest blasts killed 37 people. Authorities in China's southern Hunan province is cracking down on illegal production of fireworks and firecrackers weeks after one of the nation's deadliest pyrotechnic factory blast that killed 37 people. Officials say the campaign will run until the end of August, focusing on areas known for illegal production, as well as idle factories, abandoned sites, and closed enterprises within the city and provincial border limits. Now, authorities also say that they will resume inspections and rectify the industry's norms after the campaign ends. NASA has unveiled plans for a permanent base on the moon, with the first missions set to launch this year. This just days after China sent 3 astronauts into orbit as part of its own push to reach the lunar surface by 2030. Now, Ara Spitzer is tracking this story for CNA, and he reports from San Francisco.
The U.S. outlined its plans to return to the moon at a closely watched press conference earlier, and this time it's planning to stay. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman laid out a $20 billion blueprint, with private industry playing a central role for a permanent American foothold on the lunar surface, including robotic landers, drones, and terrain vehicles to ultimately pave the way for humans.
America is returning to the moon. We are working alongside our many international and commercial partners to leverage the incredible capabilities from commercial industry to build a moon base.
Building on last month's landmark Artemis 2 lunar flyby, 3 uncrewed missions are planned for this year, with more than a dozen to follow, according to U.S. officials. Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin has been chosen ahead of Elon Musk's SpaceX to conduct the first of those, landing scientific payloads on the South Pole's Shackleton Ridge. The company's Astrolab and Lunar Outpost have also secured contracts to build the lunar terrain vehicles intended to eventually carry astronauts across the surface. The goal is a semi-permanent human presence at the lunar South Pole by 2032, where frozen water could provide drinking water, oxygen, and rocket fuel. It comes as China's space program continues to accelerate. A couple days ago, Beijing launched the Shenzhou 23 mission. 3 astronauts now docked at China's space station, with one set to spend a full year in orbit, building the endurance data Beijing needs as it pushes towards its own crewed lunar landing by 2030, a program it is pursuing alongside Russia. These latest developments underscore that the U.S. and China have the lunar South Pole firmly in their sights, and the race to get there first is underway. For CNA, Ira Spitzer, San Francisco.
Well, with plans taking shape for a permanent base at the moon's South Pole, NASA says that the next decade will focus on turning short-term missions into a lasting human presence beyond Earth. Now, the $20 billion project will unfold in 3 phases. The first phase, running through 2029, will focus on gathering all sorts of detailed data and ensuring reliable access to the lunar surface. And as part of preparations, 3 uncrewed missions will take place this year. Phase 2, from 2029 to 2032, will establish the base's initial operating capability, allowing astronauts to begin living and working on the moon for extended periods. And by the third phase, beginning in 2032, NASA aims to establish a sustained presence with regular crew rotations and continuous operations on a lunar surface becoming a reality. Well, NASA says that the moon base will cover hundreds of square miles and will include hopping drones and rovers that will carry astronauts around the site. It would also become the world's first permanent outpost on another celestial body, serving as both a scientific hub and a testing ground for future deep space missions.
With Moonbase, Artemis astronauts will stay longer, explore farther, and conduct the kinds of science that advances exploration itself, understanding how humans operate off-world, how we build infrastructure, and how we prepare for Mars.
And for the latest space-related stories, do log on to cna.asia or our mobile app. And I hope you've enjoyed this Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime. You can find us at cna.asia and look us up on all our socials, including Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow.